Hi guys, my name is Ethan. I am a final year medical student, and these are some of the strategies that helped me score top in the year level multiple years in a row. And hopefully, they are different from the generic run of the mill strategies that you've heard before. So, if you want to learn more effectively in a more powerful way, learn more in less time, these are some things you should start implementing right away. Number one, create a story with what you learn. So, often what we're learning is nonfiction from a textbook. But if you use your imagination and create some sort of engaging story, things will all come into place better and it'll make it easier to remember things in a sequence as well. So whether that means you have your anatomy diagram and you imagine it into a strange animal or a picture, come up with some sort of story because humans' memory is primed for remembering stories. Every condition, I can imagine a patient coming in, even if I haven't seen a patient with that actual condition. You imagine a patient coming in presenting with those symptoms. You know, if you imagine someone who's jaundiced, imagine their whole body is yellow, imagine their hair is yellow. Whatever you need to do to make it stand out and make it goofy and make it fun, but create a story with what you learn. And I'm not saying a textbook story of beginning, middle, and end, but try and get a get the text in some, but try and phrase it or construct what you're learning so you can actually explain it or tell it to someone else as a story. Imagine you were trying to teach a 5-year-old that concept, but you teach it in some weird way using characters and stories. And maybe, the bacteria can be the villains in the story. And, this can be a story about tuberculosis and how they conquer the lungs and spread through the territory. But then the drugs, which is the opposing forces, then pull the territory back. Whatever you need to do, just come up with a story, and that will make it a lot easier than saying, oh, yeah, I give this drug for this one, and then this one for 3 months, this one for 6 months, but then we have to stop these two. It's too much. Okay. Number two, engage the senses. And you can add this onto your story as well. But we have 5 senses, and we often only use none, maybe even one if we learn pictures. But a lot of people, right, will find pictures easier to remember than words. There's some pictures I can remember from first and second year that I can still bring back almost the entire image of that picture and recall what the content was. But we can also engage more of the senses. As you're imagining a story, imagine what things smell like, what things sound like, what things feel like, what's the temperature. And the more senses you can engage, the more likely you are to remember some moment. Think about moments you've remembered in the past. You know, I remember the time, I scored my high score in cricket, and I remember the cheer of the crowd. I remember what the weather was doing that day. I remember how that felt. And so the more the senses you can engage, the more likely you are to retain something later. Now, sure, you might think, oh, it's going to be really hard to engage senses, but it's all about visualizing this material as well. Not just simply reading it and being like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But can you read it and make a mental image of it? Ideally, a picture or some sort of action sequence, and then engage as many senses as you can. So in my previous example, imagine TBs coming through and invading your lungs. What does that sound like? What does that smell like? Maybe you're coughing up some pus during this process, and then you can visualize that, and that has its own smell and stickiness and texture, and you can add all these things in as well. All right, number three, go meta. So rather than just reading through things and saying, oh, yep, that makes sense, done my daily reading, cool. You have to think, especially if something's complex, how on earth will I remember this later? And if you don't have a good answer to that, you're not going to remember it. So as you're going through, you have to think, how will I remember this? How will I remember that bully are big and vesicles are small? And then you can think about the strategies. Well, bully starts with a B, and so does big. Vesicles has an S in it, and so does small. Right, got it. How can I remember that alpha receptors constrict and beta receptors dilate? Well, it's alphabetical, A and C. So alpha constricts, beta dilates. Great. So as you're going through, especially with these things that are really easy to switch around or forget, come up with memory strategies. But the reminder for that is always thinking, how will I remember this particular thing later? And if it's something like, I'm pretty sure if you're honest with yourself, you would know if there's a good chance you'll remember it later or not. And if there's a poor chance you're going to remember it later, you've either got to put it on an Anki and just do lots of reps, or you've got to come up with some fun way of remembering it for later. Number four, follow your curiosity, passion, and interest. I read a really good piece from Paul Graham's essays this morning, actually, where it just says, sometimes you're curious about different topics, and whatever you're curious about, just do some extra learning in that. maybe, your exams, well, you're on a psychiatry rotation, but at the minute you did some peds lecture and that seemed really interesting. So now you want to do some more peds research. Sure, just go with it. Anytime you feel extra motivated or extra curious, let that lead you and get as much out of that as you can, because that's not gonna go forever, and that's gonna stop, and then it's gonna be really hard to learn about that topic. So, maybe I can read a short physics book and get interested and then do, 2 weeks of physics research and learn some things. But after that, I'm not really that interested anymore. So in those spur of the moment moments where you have passion and motivation to learn something, go all in on that. Do extra. Even though it might not seem it has a purpose, if you're enjoying it, just double down and do as much as you can. And the things that you learn because you want to learn, because you're passionate about learning, will always stick better than the things that you are learning because you have to learn it just for some obligation. Finally, do something every day. So even when you don't feel like it, even when there's not really a point, try and get something in, some reps in, learning something every day. That might be some Anki cards, but they're all old material generally. So I like to do a little bit of Anki and a little bit of practice questions. And it might just be, 10 minutes of practice questions, 10 minutes of Anki every day. But as long as I get that in, I know I'm heading in the right direction. I've got some new material and some revision of old material, and that will compound over time. Then when I feel like it, I can do more extensive work. If I want to do a deep dive on something, sure. There's many different ways you can learn. You can learn from YouTube videos, from books, from podcasts, but choose the one that you actually are interested in and engage with. Right? I find documentaries are really interesting, and people can recall sequences from documentaries and movies that they would never recall from a textbook or a medical YouTube video. So figure out what's related to your topic and what you actually enjoy. But that works really well for when you want to do things. When you don't want to do things, you have to just force yourself and say, I want to do a little bit every day. And maybe you need an accountability partner, or you want to go for an Anki streak, whatever you need to do, try and pride yourself in getting done as little as, just 5 minutes a day every day. And you'll see tangible difference after you've been doing that for a few months. If you do these 5 things, I guarantee you your learning will go from one level to the next. And if you want more examples about how to do any of these particular things, just let me know in the comments, and maybe that's a good idea for a follow-up video. All right, guys, thanks very much. And make sure to check out my other videos on learning and study habits, and I'll see you next time.